Tony Lyons joins us now on The Truth. He's the president of MAHA Action. That's Robert F. Kennedy's political action committee designed to make America healthy again. Tony, it's an honor to have you on The Truth today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here with you.
So, Robert F. Kennedy evidently has made a lot of people mad. It seems like the swamp is after him. Why would the swamp be after Robert Kennedy?
Well, we've got a lot of different companies and a lot of different areas of production of products that have become delivery mechanisms for toxins in this country, whether it's big food, big ag, big pharma, the big pesticide companies. So all of these companies have been basically bribing our public officials to allow them to sell things to the public. In many cases, you can't sell these products in any other country.
I'm sorry, did you say bribing our officials?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch in the sense that they're, donating money, they're hiring lobbyists, they're putting pressure on people in, all kinds of ways. But essentially, it's bribing. I mean, that's a harsh way of saying it, but that's what it amounts to. That that the policies then and the green lighting of chemicals in products is not logical. It's not common sense. It's only done because these companies have the money to donate to, members of Congress, to pay for lobbyists, and to, pay for media, and then prevent people from doing investigative journalism. So every side of it is sort of covered, and it all becomes this sort of structure that allows them to operate in ways that you can't in any other of the 30 industrialized countries. So it becomes this sort of cesspool of corruption. And you see that mostly at the CDC, but also at all of the other branches of government, and primarily the health departments are the ones that I'm focused on. And they just have failed the American people, and they've done it by protecting these big companies who give them money.
Well, I had a conversation with my friend who is a pastor one day, and I just sort of philosophically said, it seems to me that money truly has become the root of all evil in our country. And he corrected me and he said, no, John, that's not true. He said, it is the love of money that is the root of all evil, as it is accurately reported in the Bible. And it appears to me that it's exactly what you just said. I mean, and this is not a subject that I'm very knowledgeable on, other than as just a consumer of the news. Really, I've not delved into it deeply. But my perception is, as you articulated, it is about money that they're paying to politicians through political donations. And God only knows how much of that money ends up in the pockets of those politicians. The lobbying institution in this country is a monster that does not seem to be capable of taming. And I've heard Secretary Kennedy say that while we've spent all of this money and devoted all of these efforts, that we've gone from one of the healthiest nations on earth from the early 60s to one of the least healthiest nations on earth. And it does seem to be directed by money and power, not what's good for the patient any longer. What happened to the Hippocratic Oath?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we are spending 3 times the amount of money that any of the other 30 industrialized countries spend on healthcare, and we have the worst health outcomes in every area. So, mortality of infants, of young children, longevity, obesity, autism, allergies of all kinds. I mean, just everything you look at, we're doing worse than children, than adults all around the world. and it's an outrage, and it's something that should be an embarrassment to the whole country. That if we can't protect our American, I mean, if we can't protect our own children, then what can we be proud of? I mean, that should be the real baseline of what a successful country does. You know, with all the money and power we have in the world, we have to be able to find ways to protect our children.
Well, I can tell you that when I went to middle school and high school, we had the president's physical fitness test.
Right.
And out of probably 45 guys in my class, I probably finished 44th on the president's physical fitness test. And it was a source of embarrassment to me. But it wasn't because I didn't want to be physically fit. My genetics, I just wasn't born that way.
Mm.
But they had the test, and we had PE every day, which I really loved. And Richard Reed was the head of the physical education department in my school. And to this day, I am grateful to him because he never made me feel inadequate. He never made me feel inferior. And instead, he did just the opposite. He would have me lead the physical education calisthenics that we started with every day that lasted about 20 minutes. And we would do sit-ups, we would do push-ups, and we would do the rocking chair. And he would have me lead the class. I was the least likely to lead the class. And
That's
it really
exactly right.
is really causing me to get a lump in my throat because Coach Reed's not with us any longer. But, you know, he was smart enough to tap into me in a way that developed, and I'm not trying to make it about me. I'm just saying that's my experience. It helped me develop lifelong skills that are with me to this day. And I would bet if I had to take that president's physical fitness test today against my peers, I would probably beat the hell out of all of them.
Right.
But what I did was I wanted to make sure that my three boys did not go to that class and become embarrassed. So every Saturday and Sunday in particular, we would have drills in the backyard. We'd do pull-ups, we'd do sit-ups, and we would go jog a mile. And all three of them got the presidential award for being at the top of the class. I was so proud of them. And today they take care of themselves. What is the matter with that? I mean, what's there to argue with? My God, what's the matter with people?
Yeah. And then it becomes sort of a left-right thing. And, you know, Secretary Kennedy says time after time, you know, that we really have to learn to love our children more than we hate each other. And, you know, we're coming out of this period where there's been such incredible corruption of the health agencies and of the government generally over a couple of decades. And I think what you're seeing from President Trump, from Secretary Kennedy, is just sweeping reforms in all different areas, just bold, decisive action to improve food labeling, to address vaccine injuries, pharma ads, you know, the health of food generally, the distribution of drugs, um, you know, the question of pesticides is really being looked at carefully. So there's just been um, progress on a massive scale, just something like 130 different decisive actions that have taken place. And it's just such beautiful progress towards combating chronic disease in this country. And mostly it's just not even covered by the mainstream media. And there are these massive kind of smear campaigns where people go on to multiple shows on the same day and they attack Secretary Kennedy or people who work for him. And they're really kind of comprehensive programs. So when people hear those kinds of statements, they should recognize that Secretary Kennedy is going up against some of the most powerful people on earth, some of the most powerful, greedy, corrupt people on earth who don't care that their products, whatever they are, that their products harm people and that they're making money at the expense of people's welfare, of their health, of their happiness. And so Bobby Kennedy then, so they say that he's this threat to science. And the truth is that he's a threat to this stream of corporate profits um, that has really harmed people. And he's no threat to the general public. He's this incredible, this passionate man who has dedicated his life to making people healthy. And we need to have that done. We have the sickest children on earth. We need people to really focus on making children healthy, making all of us healthy once again. And I think it's happening now, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. But when you see all the negativity, you should really recognize where that comes from. It's people clinging to their profits, and it's not even, this is not in any way an anti-capitalist question. It's an anti-corruption question, because real capitalism, much more than government regulation, will solve these kinds of problems, because then people who do great things, who come up with great new products, who improve public health, who do things that actually make people's lives better, they're going to succeed in the marketplace of ideas, versus the current system, which is a system that protects companies that have bad products, that produce things that harm people, and then also in many cases gives them liability waivers so that they don't even have to face the consequences of the things that they're doing to the public.
Well, I was so proud of President Trump when he nominated Secretary Kennedy to that spot. I mean, it was a controversial nomination, and the swamp rats really came out in force to
Definitely.
oppose it. I felt like it was a bold move, and I thought it was the absolute correct move, because we need to pull the layers of the onion back and really look into the healthcare of this country. And I think Secretary Kennedy may be the foremost person to have awakened us to these facts. So I really commend President Trump for having done that, the Senate for confirming him, and especially Secretary Kennedy for being willing to take all the arrows that he has very unfairly had to endure. So I've saw Dave Ricks, the president of Eli Lilly, last week in Los Angeles at the All in One Summit, which I attended.
Hmm.
And he seemed to be one of the most level headed, reasonable, and believable people I've ever encountered. Do you think the heads of these pharmaceutical companies do you think they are aware of the extent of the corruption that their own companies are involved in to some extent? And is it just too big for them to wrestle? I mean, how does it happen? And who are the puppet masters? Who are allowing and fostering this?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, and I've heard some of those kinds of stories that people have met senior people at big food companies, big ag companies, big pharma companies, and they say, these are in many cases very pleasant people who seem like they care, um, and that they're not, that they don't seem like these arch villains
Right.
that we would guess that they are. And so the question is, how does that kind of a system work, where and maybe it's partially that the system is just set up so that these companies, what the companies are trying to do generally is just make as much money as they can. And you kind of have to have a system that incentivizes people to do good things. And what we have now is a system that incentivizes people at the heads of these companies to do the wrong thing. That's how they make the most money. That's how they're the most successful.
And for lack of a better word, just to engage in sheer greed. I mean,
Right.
that's frankly what it feels like to me. And I don't know how you regulate that. I mean, when I was a kid, a long, long time ago, I really had the perception that there was a lot of self discipline at
Mm.
all levels of our country, and whether it was in government or in business, even in parenting. that people really did strive to do the right thing. It seems like that has just gone out the window now, and it's just as we've talked about, just all about the almighty dollar.
Yeah, but if you have a system where, so there are a bunch of companies now going out trying to get liability waivers for pesticides. So they're saying, look, pesticides are dangerous. You're all right. They sometimes cause breast cancer or other kinds of cancers, but we really need them to have food for our population. And so what they're saying is, well, what we need then is a liability waiver, because if we can be sued for these products that we're creating that are necessary for the public, we're going to have to stop producing them. And the same thing is true, for example, with vaccines, that in 1986, the heads of the major pharmaceutical companies went to Washington, brought their lobbyists with them, gave big donations to members of the House and Senate, and they were able to get this bill through Congress that gave them a total liability waiver, not just for the vaccines for the 7 viruses that you vaccinated for in 1986, but for any vaccines that were ever created in the future. And that was signed into law by President Reagan. And so what that then leads to is an incentive program to kind of produce more and more vaccines. So you went from vaccinating for 7 viruses to a time where now children, by the time they're 18, they get 73 up to around 80 vaccines, different in each state. So what you need? So if you look at the companies and you say, well, the guy running this company doesn't look like a bad guy. Well, he's been kind of green lighted to just produce profits based on these products that the government says are safe and effective, and they just kind of pump them out. And so you kind of need to have a system set up where people don't have liability waivers, where they don't have the ability to poison the American public and then not have any consequences, not pay for the damage that they create. Because what we want is for the incredible scientists in this country, the incredible doctors, the smaller researchers, the smaller companies who come up with good ideas, with new ideas that actually help people. We want to have a system in place that helps them deliver their products to the public, so that the public then has the information of what's safe, what isn't safe. They have real data. There's this radical transparency. And then people begin to make better decisions. And then the companies that are doing bad things and that are hurting people don't do as well in the marketplace. That, I think, is a better system than regulation, because the problem is that the regulators can, like I said when we started, in some sense, they can be bribed, and they are bribed. And their lobbyists come in and they exert so much pressure. And that's not a good system for public health. It has to be that you're creating a product that is, that is a reasonable price, that has good health outcomes, that doesn't have toxins in it, doesn't have toxic chemicals in it. Those are the companies that ought to succeed. And we have a system now that keeps those innovative companies down and promotes these gigantic companies that are doing horrible things.
Well, I think the worst thing that you can do for any living person or any institution is to give them unlimited money with no accountability,
Exactly.
which is exactly what I think you just described: a full uh, immunity from prosecution or from
Yeah.
a civil lawsuit. How about just a limited waiver? If you are acting in good faith, in good conscience, and not knowingly, willfully uh, pushing a drug with known detrimental side effects.
Right.
And isn't that exactly what happened in COVID? That Anthony Fauci pushed these vaccines, and he knowingly and willfully knew that there were inherent risk and dangers with them, and he lied to us by telling us that social distancing and masking would keep us safe when it was just a complete lie, as we
Right.
later found out when we read his emails. So,
Yeah.
where is the accountability for Dr. Fauci? I know Rand Paul is on his case, but is
Right.
anybody else, and is there a will to hold him accountable for the lies that he told the American people?
He certainly should be. And when you look at President Trump, during the start of COVID and during Warp Speed, I mean, I've thought a lot about what happened there. And I think that what President Trump was able to accomplish was remarkable, even though it wasn't good. And I think the reason that it wasn't good is that even the president of the United States was lied to. And he was lied to by a whole group of people who were trying to convince him that this vaccine was going to totally end COVID, that it was safe and effective, and that once people got it, COVID would just end. And so that just wasn't true. And he's come out just in the last couple of weeks, and he said that they came to him and they told him that, and they presented him with information that they then didn't present to the public, so that there couldn't really be scientific scrutiny of it. And what he has demanded is that they deliver that information, their case studies, their peer reviewed studies, all of the science they have, so that we can look at it now once and for all. Because what these companies did was they tried to get it to be hidden from the public for 25 years or 50 years or 75 years. And what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do is have radical transparency, where the public can have access to the information that will make it possible for them to make better decisions for themselves and for their families. And President Trump yesterday was just so incredible when he basically said, I want to be known and remembered as the president who really cared about public health, who really rolled back chronic disease, who took autism that was, 40 years ago, it was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 31. And he said, I want to roll that back to 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 20,000. And I think that was really just a fascinating moment. And it was just sort of, a sign that we have a president now. Maybe we should call him the MAHA president, but a president who's really willing to dedicate his time and his energy and his resources, and to bring in Secretary Kennedy and his whole team to really address the chronic disease epidemic and to try to make Americans healthy once again, and to recognize how important it is that you can't have a really successful country without a healthy population. And so that's what they're trying to do. And I think they're going to be incredibly effective, and that they've done more in the first 7 months or 8 months than any other administration has done probably in the history of the country. But things have been going downhill for a long time, and they're just kind of turning it back.
Well, I agree with everything that you just said. I want to, before we move on to autism and Tylenol, um, I I have made the same point that you just made 100 times, and I get a lot of pushback from people. They're mainly anti-Trumpers, the Trump deranged people, but they're not willing to give him a break at all. I mean, and
Right.
they assume that he is supposed to have the inherent knowledge of an MD, which he has never professed to do. I think it was perfectly reasonable that he would listen to Anthony Fauci, who was the director of the National Health Institute and had
Right.
been involved in health in the United States and the government for 30 years. He was the highest paid member of government. And then he
Right.
had that little Dr. Burks running around on his coattails. And the only thing that I felt then and I feel now was that when they got rid of Robert Redfield, that was a huge red flag that someone should have stood up and taken notice of, because he was telling us that the narrative on COVID was not correct, and why he is continuing to suffer in wherever we send our people, where the Russians, Siberia. I mean, I think Dr. Redfield is in effectively Siberia, and he needs to be rehabilitated. Maybe Robert Kennedy could bring him back in some official capacity, because I think he was a truth broker, and he
Yeah.
paid a big price for it. And I really resent that. But now, so autism. I've heard about autism obviously more in the last 10 years than I have in my entire life, because as you point out, it's gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31 people, children.
Yeah.
That is a sobering, staggering statistic that people should really stop and reflect on for a moment. But what is exactly autism? I have kind of a vague notion of it, but then you see people with like Elon Musk that they say, oh, he's on the spectrum. Well, okay, I don't even really know what that means. He's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum.
Yeah. There was one thing that I just wanted to show you first, and that is
Please.
Robert Redfield's new book. It's called Redfield's Warning.
I am so glad you shared that. I have not heard of that, but I will definitely get a copy of it and read it.
Yeah, it's not coming out for about a month. It's called Redfield's Warning. What
Are
I
you in touch
learned.
with Dr. Redfield by chance?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that his name's right on the tip of my tongue. He wrote No Trade is Free. He was in the Commerce Department under Wilbur Ross. Just I've had dinner with him. I know him personally. I'm just drawing a blank. Anyway, when he wrote his book, The Truth was his first appearance, and that book became a New York Times bestseller. So
Yeah.
tell Dr. Redfield that you've got a place for him to make his debut. It's a good petri dish for an interview. He can come here and experiment.
Yeah, that's great.
Bob Lighthouser, who pops in my brain. Anyway,
So let me say a few things about what President Trump did yesterday, and then I've actually got to go. So
give us a 1-minute primer on autism, if you would.
okay, so autism and the idea that vaccines don't cause it is a purposely complicated issue. So they say, well, vaccines don't cause autism, right? So the problem is that you can't even define a vaccine now, because after the 1986 law that gave a total liability waiver to any manufacturer of a vaccine in the United States, this law was so comprehensive. These were highly profitable companies, and they actually were able to go to Washington, D.C. and just make themselves much more profitable. But then you saw this incredible upswing in the number of vaccines, right?
Yes.
So they didn't want to change one word of that act of Congress, because it was so generous to them. And it was such an incentive to make more and more vaccines, because you could never have responsibility for any vaccine, for any side effect, for anything. So what they then did was they kept changing the definition of a vaccine. So in the US, we have the broadest possible definition, so that it's almost like anything that lessens the seriousness of a virus or a bacteria. It doesn't have to be a needle. It can be a patch. It can be a nasal spray. So they want it to be as broad as possible,
which expands their liability waiver.
Because then the liability waiver
gets
more and more broad, right?
Jiminy Christmas.
And then you look at autism, that they say that vaccines can't cause, but you don't have any definition for autism either. And autism is just a basket of symptoms. But in that basket, you currently have 2.3 million children with an autism diagnosis. And there's a court that was created by that 1986 act, and it's called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program Court. And through that court, billions of dollars have been paid out to the parents of vaccine injured children. And None of those payments have gone to children whose parents claim that they developed autism, because they don't compensate for autism. What they do compensate for is many of the symptoms that go into this really vague autism diagnosis. So billions of dollars have been paid for injured children who have all of these symptoms that are actually autism or a part of autism, whether it's neurological damage, brain damage, tics, uh, dyspraxia, um, OCD. So many of those kinds of things. If you get those from a vaccine and you can prove it, you can get compensation from the government, not from the companies who created the products, but from those from that court. So there's no question that there's a correlation between vaccines and autism. And so yesterday, President Trump and Secretary Kennedy and his whole team uh, highlighted a connection between Tylenol and pregnancy and and the newborn child. So what sometimes happens is something like this. So a child goes into a doctor, gets say 5 or 6 vaccines, maybe one of them is the MMR. That then causes a febrile seizure, which is not that uncommon. And but a febrile seizure can, in certain circumstances, cause brain damage or lead to a seizure disorder that can lead to brain damage. But one of the things that parents then do is they see the child has a fever and they give the child Tylenol. And then the Tylenol becomes a part of that brain damage story. Um, so what's happened over all these years is that you haven't been able to even talk about these things. And what we're seeing more and more is the opening up of science, the idea that it's okay to talk about anything, that you can make a claim, you can have a hypothesis, and then you can have discussion and debate. That's what real science is. But we've had 20 or 30 years of science being whatever the government tells you it is, whatever the corporate manufacturer of a product says it is. So they say our products are safe. If you disagree with them, they attack you, they engage in smear campaigns. So that's just a total, sort of corrupt system. And you had President Trump coming out on national television saying, don't go get 5 vaccines in the same day. Don't go get multiple virus vaccines. Try to find them separately. Don't get vaccines that have mercury in them, because mercury is a known neurotoxin. Don't get vaccines that have aluminum in them. So suddenly we're allowed to talk about it once again. And that, I think, is just incredible progress, because this has never been about being anti-vaccine or anti-drugs or anti-pesticides or anti-chemicals in food. It's the idea that we have a right to get good, valid information so that we can think about how these products might affect us. And we know more about ourselves. We know more about our own children, and our doctors know about them. And there's a history, so we can make better decisions. We don't need more regulation. We need more information, and we need to open up the world to this much broader discussion of what's good for us, what works, and what alternatives there are, so that there are hundreds of different companies that have real access to the public and can make their argument that there's a simpler, healthier way to do all kinds of things. That there's better food, that there are better drugs, that maybe fewer drugs are better for all of us. All of these kinds of things. Are there scientific alternatives to some of the pesticides? Can you get a the same outcome or even a better output of food products without using the worst, most toxic chemicals? So that's what I think is happening here, and I think that it's just an incredible breakthrough. and it shows a, a president and an HHS secretary who are prioritizing public health, and that can actually be great for the economy. That healthy people go out more, they spend more money, they start businesses, they invest. Bobby Kennedy says that somebody who's healthy has 1,000 dreams. Somebody who has a chronic disease has one dream, and that is to stop suffering.
Hmm.
So I think you can get this incredible boost of energy and of innovation in the economy by stopping the corruption, that the corruption becomes a bottleneck to common sense, to innovation, to good ideas, to new products. People go all around the world now to do procedures that you can't do in the US. People go to Mexico to have stem cell
Yeah.
treatments, or the
Yeah.
Bahamas, or they go to Germany to have a certain kind of knee surgery. So we need to be the country that people come from all around the world on, to get treatments. That we have these great scientists, these great doctors, these great um, business people who are coming up with new ideas, but the system is set up to stifle those new ideas and to stifle innovation. And when that stops, I think you're going to see Americans healthier than ever, the economy doing better than ever, our military not having the same problems that it's having finding healthy people.
Hmm.
So I think that there are great things happening, and that one of the roadblocks to it is this insane kind of Trump derangement syndrome, where people on the left are going to, eat a chemical in a food just to spite the president, or take Tylenol while they're pregnant to spite the president, or just do the opposite of anything. And but I think that there are real breakthroughs being made, and that some of the things that are being seen now just can't be unseen, and that this administration is just really hitting it out of the ballpark. So I'm proud to have a small role in that, and just so grateful to the president and to Secretary Kennedy for the work that he's doing against all odds.
Well, I wish you could stay and talk to us for the rest of the day. I know that you've got other and better things to do, but it has been a fascinating conversation. And when you do talk to Secretary Kennedy, I wish you would just tell him that, like Richard Nixon said, uh, that might not be the best intro, that the great silent majority is a reality, and people are cheering for him, praying for him, and urging him on. And I'm certainly one of those. And I also would echo that same sentiment for you. And Tony Lyons, the president of MAHA Action and the MAHA PAC, thank you for what you're doing to help keep us and help us be more healthy. We really appreciate you and all the effort.
Thank you so much, John.